Most things involved with the Mac work right out of the box. You turn them on or plug them in and you can get going right away. But an airport base station, although it does get going right away when you plug it in, does require some configuration for passwords. So let me show you how you can do that. Inside the Applications folder, inside the Utilities folder, is Airport Utility. And the first thing that it will do is it will go out and look for any airport base stations that it can find. And they'll be listed here, and you can select the one that you want to configure. You click Continue, and the next thing that you have to do is enter the password for the base station. This is not the password for the network. This is the password to configure the base station. And you start with both network and base station passwords set to public, lowercase, public, P-U-B-L-I-C. If you have forgotten the password, then there's a small hole on the back and you can insert a straightened out paperclip for a second or so to reset the base station, and the passwords will go back to public, both for the network and for the base station. When you type in your password, it's a good idea to store the password in the keychain because the base station password is not used very often, and it's one of those passwords that we tend to forget. So if it's in the keychain, you can get to it. Now, as you walk through, you are able to name both the base station and the network that it will be serving. And you may want to do this with separate names because the network may be served by several Airport Express devices. Continue, and you will set the configurations for what radio mode is used for the base station. And obviously these will depend on what devices you have on the network and what your base station is. Your big choice here is whether you want to be compatible with the B and G slower speeds or with the A slower speed, if you care at all. Then what you need to do is to set the security for your wireless network. You don't have to put security on the wireless network. You can say no security, but that means any computer with a wireless card in it can get onto your network, and then onto the internet or onto the network and possibly onto your computer if you don't have security set on the computer. So you should have security set on the network. This is not the security for the base station, but for the network. This is the best security for most individuals and small businesses. This one, WEP, can be broken fairly easily, so use WPA2 if you possibly can, and set a password, and you may want to remember it in your keychain. Then you have to set the configuration from the base station to the internet, if there is one. If there isn't one, you choose to go down here and say I'm not ready to connect to the internet. Commonly, from the base station to the internet, you are plugging the base station into a DSL or cable modem or into a local area network. And you're choosing here whether you're using the IP address, either static or with DHCP, or point-to-point protocol over Ethernet. Most of the time, if you're using a cable modem or DSL, for most servers today, at least in the United States, you're using this first choice. That's why it's the first choice. And then you may need to configure the information from your internet service provider so that you can connect properly to the internet. The main set of settings that you'll need if you need to configure it is when you're not using DHCP, when you're manually setting the addresses, you'll use this option to get the data entry fields that you can set here with the IP address and so forth. You can connect a USB disk to the base station, which means that every computer on the wireless network can see that shared disk, and they can connect to it with the base station password or a separate password for the disk. This is one of those areas where you have to strike a balance. Things should be protected with a password. If you use the same password for the base station and the disk, then if the password is given out, people can get onto both the base station and the disk. However, once you start proliferating separate passwords for the base station and disk, then you wind up with the worst of all possible cases, which is people writing down the passwords and taping them to the side of the computer so that you can remember them. So I think in most cases, for most of us, it's okay to use the same password for the base station and the disk. And this is also an important one. What can guests do, particularly if you have not set up a password on the base station, which you should have. And then here is where you change the base station password if you need to. It has started out when it comes out of the box as public, and you should change it to a meaningful and rememberable password and store it in the keychain. And these are the settings that have been created here. And if you want, you can show the passwords so that you're able to confirm them, because you're in this section, you've already given a password. And if you update the base station, what will happen is that it will send the settings out to the base station. The base station is restarting. Notice that it's disappeared from the list, and when it has restarted, it will be back in the list. Now that's the step-by-step process that you can go through. Now let's look at the manual configuration process.